Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina wa Habibina wa Shafi'ina Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin tahirin. Islamic medicine, or what I call traditional Islamic healing and medicine, is much more than the accumulated accomplishments of Muslim scientists. The basis of Islamic medicine is the divine origin of humanity and our role in the cosmic order. The principles of Islamic medicine are presented in the Holy Quran, expounded by the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and further explained by the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhum as-salam. As a sacred science, it is rooted in Tawheed, the oneness of God. And because God is the cause of being itself, Tawheed reveals that there is a simultaneous background of oneness that encompasses the appearance of the multiplicity that we live in. Through the sacred vantage point of Tawheed, we recognize the human body, mind, soul as a seamless whole. So it follows that Islamic medicine is concerned with the totality of the human experience. So it has much to say about personal, ancestral, communal, and global concerns. It has a profound philosophical framework, rather than it simply being a cookbook of treatments for a list of illnesses. It is also a teleological science. In other words, meaning is implicit in every experience and event, whether or not it is ever discovered. God says in Surah Al-An'am, the chapter of the cattle in the Quran, "With him are the keys of the unseen. None knows them but he. He knows what is in land and sea. Not a leaf falls, but he knows it. Not a grain in the earth's shadows, not a thing, fresh or withered, but it is in a book manifest." The principles of Islamic medicine are actualized through treatment techniques and medicinal agents to address the multidimensional nature of life. These therapies include spiritual practices, spiritual prescriptions, counseling, attar or aromatherapy, fumigation or the burning of incense, sound and music, herbal medicine, food medicine, including dietary guidelines, recommendations, prohibitions, and fasting, prescriptive exercise, hijama or cupping and bleeding, hammam or hydrotherapy, manual therapies such as bone setting and massage, acupuncture, and surgery. Islamic medicine also addresses the moral and ethical questions of health and illness and life and death. And it provides a model of service. Muslim healthcare providers and institutions demonstrated the principles of Islam through humanitarian service to the sick. Islamic medicine does not have a reductionist worldview that sees life as purely material, which is a primary characteristic of conventional medicine. Islamic medicine acknowledges that the nafs, or soul, is the most important consideration in health. It follows that its clinical framework recognizes and honors the multidimensional nature of the human being rather than treating people as carbon copies of each other. The highest form of medicine is the illumination of the soul that comes from God. Recall the profound words of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi from the dua or supplication of Kumail, Ya man ismuhu dawa'an, O thou whose name is medicine, wa dhikruhu shifa'an, and whose remembrance or invocation is healing. Spiritual health is the alchemical key to health. It is said that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Beware, verily there is a piece of flesh in the body of man, which when sound, the whole body is sound, and when corrupt, the whole body is corrupt, and that is the heart. So, the soul rules the body. If the heart is clear, the body will be clear. If the heart is not clear, the body will be troubled, no matter how much you support the body with regular exercise, the purest food and drink, and fresh air and sunshine. In my work with patients, I read the narratives of their souls, which have sunken into their body tissues. I measure these narratives against the ruler of truth. So this requires that I be in communion with the truth. This is why spiritual cultivation is essential for practitioners of Islamic medicine. You do not have to be a Muslim to be treated with Islamic medicine, but you must be a believer to practice Islamic medicine. This is where the prophets and imams come in. Their example, advice, and supplications teach us how to rethink how we see and understand ourselves, others, the world, and life. Their vision of reality was holistic, not simply material. Recall the supplication of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who said, "O Lord, show me things as they truly are." Their unobstructed spiritual vision equipped them to recognize and treat the root of a problem, often simply with words functioning as medicine for the soul, and having a direct impact on the body, rather than chasing the periphery of a problem by focusing on the body alone. It is said that Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayhi, said, "The disease of the heart is worse than the disease of the body." Consider the following case. A young lady contacted me for help for a collapsed lung, which had come on suddenly. Her doctors could not explain the cause. She spent her days in bed from the extreme fatigue caused by her condition. She called me several months after it happened, hoping for a natural treatment option so that she could avoid surgery. Her surgeon had given her a window of time to decide before the problem would become critical and necessitate a surgical intervention. We never actually met, as the consult was by telephone. In the course of our conversation, I realized that she had lost her inspiration in life after a personal tragedy. It was then that her lung collapsed, reflecting directly the condition of her soul down into the cellular matrix of her lung. I proceeded by asking her very specific questions designed to bring her into communion with God through her own center, so that she might remember who she really is, where she comes from, and her purpose in life. Upon waking the next morning, her right lung had completely reinflated. Alhamdulillah. The principles that govern all of creation are found in the Holy Quran, and they are unpacked for us by the prophets and the imams alayhum salam, through their lived example and advice. It is our challenge and responsibility to develop and implement these cosmic principles to address life in this realm of multiplicity in all the ways it might show up as we encounter new challenges with every discovery and innovation. Real healing takes at least a portion of the time over which an illness actually developed. If an illness developed over 7 years, it will likely take at least 1 year to heal it completely. Yes, you might eradicate a bacterial infection with a 10-day course of antibiotics to bring relief to acute symptoms. But healing the root cause of the vulnerability to infection takes more time, with additional time for the collateral damage caused by the antibiotics. Conventional medicine almost entirely focuses on the immediate and very little on what precedes and follows a crisis. Of course, this is its domain of expertise, and I am grateful for the sincere service of so many well-intentioned providers. And we understand that most of life is the space between hospital and doctor visits. Life medicine must be interwoven with our daily lives so that we are less likely to need emergency intervention. When taqwa, or God consciousness, is established in not only your doings, but in your very being, then you will realize an expansion that engenders radiant health. Conventional medicine is largely focused on emergency care and the management of illness and disease, which it is quite expert in and highly equipped to handle. Regardless of its limitations, conventional medicine is still a gift from God. Many of the foundational principles of conventional medicine were developed by Muslim physicians whose achievements as far back as 1,000 years ago were nothing short of spectacular. In any case, conventional medicine does not go much deeper than management because it is based in a paradigm that does not acknowledge unseen realities. It cannot deal with what it does not believe in. Islamic medicine and traditional medicine in general is primarily concerned with root causes, which often begin at the level of the unseen. While Islamic medicine does deal with manifestations, it does so while simultaneously addressing the underlying cause of those manifestations. Contributing factors that make up these subtle realities I'm referring to include your sense of self, which is directly related to your spiritual development, and the health of your relationships in life, to people, to your community, and to nature. Most importantly, the crown of Islamic medicine is spiritual practice, which you will not find in conventional medicine. Natural medicine is now quite popular, but it is still not fully accepted and integrated into the conventional medical setting. It is important to understand that this is ultimately an ideological battle waged by forces of disbelief. In the last century, these forces almost succeeded in destroying Indian medicine, Chinese medicine, and Tibetan medicine. Islamic medicine was the hardest hit. Consider the question of why Islamic medicine has been largely forgotten, so that the average Muslim knows almost nothing about it. So even if there was a massive wealth of evidence to substantiate natural medicine, ideology doesn't care, because it believes what it believes, irrespective of evidence. This is clear today among all those world leaders who deny any number of observations verified by modern science, such as climate change. I often hear allopathic physicians denounce natural medicine outright, saying that there is no evidence that it works. But what I am actually hearing is that they have not reviewed the evidence, which is readily available with a simple internet search. This suggests that they are not interested in the evidence. Conventional medicine has dictated the terms of the discourse on medicine. For example, conventional medicine has defined what constitutes evidence and what does not. So the very paradigm of Islamic medicine that rests on the acknowledgement of a divine reality, the spirit, the soul, and the world of the unseen is refuted by conventional medicine, and often with a great deal of anger. Why? Because ideology is not objective, and when it is threatened, it shows its true face. Sadly, many Muslim scientists are among these ideologues, even while being decent, pious people. Why? Because the Muslim world has not recovered from being colonized, and many have bought into the narrative of superiority touted by their colonizers. The colonized were especially dazzled by the science and technology of the colonizers. Seeing is powerful, after all. However, when the knowledge of appearances is manipulated to serve limited ends other than God, it is what our ancestors understood as sorcery, the ultimate objective of which is to lead people astray by distracting them from the truth of who we really are, where we come from, and our true purpose in this life. Remember, the ideology of scientism does not accept the divine reality. If you doubt this, consider what would happen today if God sent a messenger making a claim of being conversant with angels. Mental health professionals are trained to understand such a situation as pathology, and might very well commit such a person to an institution. Be sure the modern medical industry has many abuses in spite of the many sincere people who go into the field for virtuous reasons. For anyone who has grown up in the developed world, unless you are raised with an appreciation of traditional medicine in your household, when you do finally hear about it, it is usually in the pejorative. Otherwise, people become believers when they stumble upon traditional medicine, usually in the course of seeking solutions to their health concerns when conventional medical options have been exhausted, or what is being offered is invasive and risky, not to mention usually quite costly. Furthermore, people tend to believe in what is normative. Most people in the developed world grow up with conventional medicine, which is inherently loud in its approach, so its effects are unmistakable. Whether this is always the best approach, however, is another story. More and loud is usually not synonymous with precision and quality. Real healing is elegant, unobtrusive, and subtle. It is an invitation, not a command. Most people in the developed world do not have any profound depth of experience with traditional medicine. Yes, today many have some experience, but when I say profound, I'm referring to recovery from a debilitating condition, if not terminal. And after all, there is no substitute for direct experience as a doorway to knowledge. However, while experience is a direct way of knowing, it is not necessarily superior. God guides whomsoever He wills. God can give you knowledge directly into your heart about, as the Quran reads, things of which you know not, about realities you have not experienced. Is this not what God did with the prophets? Islamic medicine is extraordinary because it brings you, through a healing experience, into direct relationship with what you do not see: God, the Spirit, and the soul. Most people today believe in atoms, but no one has ever seen an atom with the naked eye. This belief is the norm until people are convinced. So, who deserves to be shown? We should strive to deserve rather than merely expecting grace, as if we are entitled to it. Consider this verse from Surah Al-Hujurat, the chapter of the rooms. The Bedouins say, "We believe." Say unto them, O Muhammad, you believe not, but say instead, we submit, for faith has not yet entered into our hearts. However, if you obey God and His Messenger, He will not withhold from you any of the reward for your deeds. Verily, God is forgiving, singularly merciful. Part of the problem of Islamic medicine today is that most of the people who are telling its story have, by and large, been raised in the system that has fully embraced the modern scientific paradigm. Pious Muslim MDs who have never actually studied Islamic medicine have assumed center stage. They applaud the accomplishments of Islamic medicine that mirror conventional medicine with a nostalgia for what is believed to be the golden age of Islam, while the real substance of Islamic medicine is dismissed as unscientific superstition from a bygone era. It is important to know and respect one's limits. This interview is a positive step in bringing the truth of Islamic medicine to light. Statistically, it's almost impossible to go through life without the support of conventional medicine. And this is perfectly fine. It is not synonymous with failure of any kind. Nevertheless, spiritually, however, anything is possible. Those who really live the principles of Islamic medicine can taste this possibility. I can attest to this as someone who lives according to these principles. I have not had medical insurance for the last 30 years. My last scheduled medical doctor visit was as a teenager because it was required before entering university. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is a good idea, that conventional medicine is bad, but rather that knowledge is empowering and transformative. If you are nourishing health then you are not likely to make or contract an illness. So you are not beholden to a model of illness management. And if I were to find myself in crisis, I would go to the hospital because I know when to put things in their proper place, inshallah. And may God protect us all. An interesting point to consider is this: why are there no Islamic medical hospitals in the world? And why are there no Muslim-operated hospitals in Western countries, as we find so many Christian and Jewish hospitals? According to the National Institute of Health, religious hospitals represent approximately 13% of all U.S. community-based hospitals and provide nearly 20% of hospital beds. And yet, there is not a single Muslim-run hospital in this country. This clues us into the global condition of the Ummah today. Consider the example of the Mansouri Hospital in Cairo, which was completed in the year 1284 of the Common Era by the order of King al-Mansur Qala'un, the Mamluk ruler of Egypt. It was one of the largest, most elaborate hospitals ever built, equipped for 8,000 people, serving Cairo for 7 centuries. It was sustained by ongoing annual gifts of 1 million dirhams. No one was turned away, regardless of race, religion, creed, or nationality. Men and women were admitted to separate wards and cared for. Men and women were admitted to separate wards and cared for by practitioners of the same gender. Day and night, 50 reciters intoned the Quran. Professional storytellers entertained the sick with their tales. At nightfall, musicians played melodies to put the patients to sleep. And on departure, patients were given enough money so that they would not have to immediately resume work. The hospital was divided into sections dealing with specific medical specialties and health issues. It had its own pharmacy, library, and lecture halls. It had a mosque for Muslims and a chapel for Christians. There was no time limit for inpatient treatment. The waqf or endowment specifically stated, "The hospital shall keep all patients, men and women, until they are completely recovered. All costs are to be borne by the hospital, whether the people come from afar or near, whether they are residents or foreigners, strong or weak, low or high, rich or poor, employed or unemployed, blind or sighted, physically or mentally ill, learned or illiterate. There are no conditions of consideration and payment. None is objected to nor even indirectly hinted at for non-payment. The entire service is through the magnificent of God, the Generous One." My center here in the United States is a prototype of this grand project. If God wills, perhaps we will build something like the Mansouri Hospital again. My father was my first teacher of Islamic medicine, which he learned from his family, as well as 5 decades of global travel before I was even born. He was born in 1923 and left this world in January 2016 at the age of 93 and a half years. May God embrace him. My father introduced me to a reservoir of world wisdom. I grew up with a profound respect for and appreciation of the many peoples of our planet and their rich cultures and traditions. This included their spirituality and medicine. From my mother, I learned unconditional love. Her love saw through race, gender, class, and nationality. She loved everyone and was especially gracious with the simple, humble people of the world. People would flock to her just to sit with her. This kind of love is the heart of healing. She left this world in February 2011. May God embrace her. My father took care of us with Islamic medicine and conventional medicine as needed. So I lived Islamic medicine before I discussed it or read about it. By the age of 6, I was reciprocating the techniques that he was teaching me. My study with him was not textual, but contextual, through direct experience. It was a study of life through my very being, and secondarily through observation. This was extraordinary because I was gathering subtle impressions before I even had the language and conceptual framework to understand them. These came later. This embodied practice study has continued for me until now. It is the primary mode of teaching that I employ because I have found it to be the most direct and transformative, as opposed to the modern information-based learning model that distances people from the knowing heart. Because I have lived my entire life according to the principles of Islam, including its prescriptions for well-being and healing, it is seamless with my life. At some point along my spiritual journey, I realized my true need in God and then began to divest from the world. As a result, I live relatively simply. I am satisfied with what I have. My desires are really otherworldly, as they should be for anyone whose greatest love is for God. I am not addicted to experiences, but I am concerned with what God is communicating to me within the experiences that are offered. I live a clean life as much as possible. I avoid doing harm to myself, others, and the world. I am quite scrupulous about what I allow myself to be exposed to. I refrain from poisons. I don't smoke, drink, or do drugs. And I only use pharmaceuticals as a last resort, which is to say, very seldom. I do not go to profane places where the energy is unclean. I intentionally chose to live in a place that is safe, clean, quiet, close to nature, and temperate in climate. I train almost every day, practicing a combination of meditation, yoga, and qigong, mind-body practices with built-in wisdom. These practices do not develop the person at the body's expense, as do most modern forms of exercise. I practice conscious rest, being careful about how much I invest in this world, and I safeguard my doings in the world from negative and limited intentions. I am careful about whom I associate with. I invest in heart-centered relationships with good people. I am highly sensitive to psychic airwaves, so I monitor my relationships carefully, doing my best to do no harm, to resolve conflict and make peace, and to be respectful and on the best terms with everyone. This is challenging as I interact with many people. As Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi is said to have said, "Be like the flower that gives up its fragrance to even the hand that crushes it." Most importantly, I have a regular spiritual practice, so I am in regular communion with God and listening very attentively. My days are actually built around practice. I spend a lot of time in deep contemplation about God, creation, the world, humanity, and my condition. And much of my time is dedicated to serving where I can as a healer, teacher, friend, and human being. As a lifelong student, I stay curious and I practice approaching the present moment with a beginner's mind. This is important because being a healer is really a vocation, not a job. If your heart is not in it, you should be wary of entering that intimate sacred space where people are vulnerable, lest you do more harm. I rarely get sick. When I do, I transition through it fairly quickly, largely because I know what to do. However, I am not invulnerable. I was quite ill on several occasions while growing up, through which, however, I learned a great deal about healing. And as I increased in knowledge and cultivation, my episodes of illness diminished. If I was invulnerable, I would not be a good healer because I would not be able to relate with people's suffering, which is critically important in holding a space of healing for people. There is a powerful healing resonance that takes place between the heart of a healer and that of patients, which is only possible when the heart center is activated.